Hey everybody, Ben here from DMC Films and Cinder Studios, and this video is going to be really long. Well, I am back again with another acrylic painting tutorial, and while this video is sort of targeted towards the beginners, this exercise is really good for artists of any level to do. Today we're going to be making a color wheel and talking about color relationships and value. So before we actually get to the lesson, there's a couple things I do want to mention. First, because this video is so lengthy, I included time codes in the description box below. They probably won't be up immediately after upload, but very shortly after that I should have them. And that'll help anyone who doesn't want to watch the entire length of this video to kind of skip around to the individual parts and find what you need easier. Second, depending on the colors you're using to make your color wheel, you might see a slight difference in variation in the different shades and tones, and that's just because of the different pigments. For example, a cadmium red and a pearl red are going to be two different reds, two different pigments, and probably won't mix and change in the same way that the colors that I'm using today will. So, that being said, let's get started. So at this point in the video, you're going to want to turn your annotations on if they are not already on. And if you want to skip ahead to the value scale side of the color video, please click the annotation over here. If not, I'll be starting on this in just a moment. So my equipment for today is going to be a nice little flat brush, a painting knife, a little bit of water, and my glass palette for mixing. So to start things off, we're going to lay out our primary colors. I've already done that on the palette, but we're going to get them down here on paper. My colors for today are going to be cadmium red medium, cadmium yellow medium, and cerulean blue. Getting a little bit of water on the brush to start, just to kind of get the paint to flow. And I'm using bristle paper today, which will give me a decent flow and coverage for the paint, and a nice white support that'll make those colors really show up nice. Move my water over. I've got a circle traced out here, but I'm not even going to come close to where the edges are actually supposed to be. But as long as it's fairly round, I think we'll do okay. So there's our red. Go ahead and rinse the brush. We don't want anything mixing too far ahead of ourselves here. Get into our yellow. And as always, I'm using regular heavy body acrylic paint, so it's going to have a lot of nice coverage and pigment density. Of course, the yellow, being the way yellow is, you can see a little bit of those pencil lines underneath. I see my Y for yellow still kind of sticking out. So you'll probably need either to really lay it on thick or to do 2 coats of the yellow, but not super concerned with it. And we'll go into our blue. And those are our primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. Now things get a little more complicated as we start to build our secondaries, orange, green, and purple or violet, depending on how you say it. These colors are distinctly between our primary colors, but aren't necessarily a 50-50 mix of each of them, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment here. So I'm going to start with my lighter colors, the orange and yellow, and you'll see what I mean besides lighter and darker colors when we talk about value in the second part of this video. But I like to start with the yellow because the red is such a more potent and powerful color that it can very easily overpower that yellow. Add some red. It rounds out to a fairly nice orange. Test it out down here. That looks pretty good. I think it's a little bit redder than it could be, so I'm going to grab a little more yellow. Just lighten it up ever so slightly. And there we have a nice brilliant orange that we can fill in. A lot of times when I personally make orange, I actually like to throw in a little bit of white to the mix to bring up the tint just ever so slightly. I think it adds a nice, more well-rounded look to it, but that's really all up to you. Next up, we'll take our green, mixing the yellow and blue. And for that, I think, again, I will start with yellow, because comparatively, blue is actually a darker color in value. I shouldn't need quite as much blue, because again, it's very powerful in compared to the yellow. I'm standing at about a yellow-green right now, which is closer to a tertiary color. I'll talk about those in just a moment. In mixing a green, I actually find that a lot of times a phthalo blue works a little bit better. But I wanted to get my cerulean for this demo. I think it mixes a little bit better with the other colors. And we'll call that our green. It's actually still a little bit more yellow than I would like. It looks a little better. Especially when mixing a green, you're going to run into sections that you feel are a little bit more blue or more yellow, and picking the right blue to mix a green can really make or break your piece. For this reason, I usually have a tube or two of green on my regular color palette in addition to my other primary colors. Finally, one of my favorite colors to mix is probably purple. I'm actually going to start with the blue this time around. But for mixing purple, it actually doesn't matter quite as much. I have a little bit of remnant green water in my brush, but it's not affecting the paint really at all, so I'm not concerned about it. This is very close to sort of a blue of a red violet. And I'm actually going to drop that in right now. Actually, that's very close to where I need to be for a little bit more blue. And I think that'll actually end up being... well, it's really hard to say. I'm going to stick with my original choice and make this my red violet on the tertiary colors. And I need a little bit more blue on my palette in order to continue to mix that violet. Make sure my brush is nice and rinsed. That's looking much better now. And there we have our purple, which is now too blue. See, this is where things get tricky. Trying to find that good balance. Again, this cerulean blue, what I'm finding just through this demo is that it's not as good of a mixing color for the purple either, as well as the green. It has a slightly, because it has a more pure tint, doesn't lean to a warmer or a cooler side. You have some slightly different variations. And there we have our secondary colors. And now we've already started on our tertiaries, which are the red, green, red-orange kind of colors. And since we started with the red-violet and we have the sort of decided violet color, I'm going to add a bunch more blue.
and make our blue-violet. Like that. These are definitely not circles anymore. I've gotten pretty lazy. Still have some of our green mixed up, so we can drag some of that into our blue and darken it down. Rinse our brush again. Work on our yellow-green, which to me is a much easier color to make. Especially with this set of colors. Now things get a little more interesting. Take some of this orange that we have left, drag that into our yellow. That brighter yellow-orange color. Oh, this just turned red. Whoops. Now just mix some yellow back into it. Right on the paper. Right about like that. Add a little extra on the brush there. As long as I still have this main orange color found, I'm going to throw a little bit extra on the orange, cover up some of my pencil lines, and we'll dip into the red, and we'll get that fiery red-orange, which is another really great color of paint to make. And there we have our completed color wheel. Now before we move on to our values, I do want to bring out my personal color palette, which you can find a video link to over here by clicking on the palette. But a couple colors I want to point out are Quinacridone Magenta by Golden. This particular color is really great for mixing violets and those blue-red tones. Really what you get out of this is if you add yellow, you get a nice sort of fiery orange, and if you add blue, you get a nice violet. It's a really great sort of cheating color, but I use it a lot because it's a nice quick mix. Additionally, I have my two greens, Hooker's Green Hue and Phthalo Green Blue Shade. The Phthalo Green Blue Shade has a bluer tone to it. It's much richer of a green, and the Hooker's Green Hue leans towards the yellow side. Being a landscaper, it's really nice having the greens just offhand from time to time. For my value demo, I'm going to be using the Phthalo Green and the Quinacridone Magenta to mix up some quick colors. Welcome to part 2 of the color and value tutorial video. If you skipped ahead to this point, congratulations, welcome to this part 2. If you just watched through all the color section, I thank you for that. So for my acrylic color values chart, I'm going to be doing black and white, red and green, yellow purple, orange and blue, and those are going to be mixed into each other and to create a value scale. I will also be doing green to black and green to white, in addition to yellow to black and yellow to white to give you tint and tone variations. So let's get started. So starting things off, I've laid out my black and my white, which are both medium body acrylics. The black is a mix of Ivory Black and Mars Black. Mars Black has a slightly duller tone, and Ivory Black tends to dry to a little more of a shine. The two together make a really nice mid-ground black, and the white is called Bright White, but it is really just titanium white. So we're going to start out by laying down these values, and I'm going to, at this point, throw you guys a link to my values and color video that I did a little while ago. For that video, you can click somewhere in this area. There'll be an annotation there. And with that, I did, as I'm doing here, just a black and white value scale, as well as a green and red one. If you do want to skip ahead, please check the time codes in the description box, and you can skip right ahead to the yellow-purple scale. That's our black, and we'll get our pure white on this side. We'll do a few different tones between them. what I find in making these value scales is because black is such a powerful dark color, you want to start with white and slowly add black, not the other way around. So we'll get some white, the tiniest little bit of black. To make our first gray. That's actually very similar to the tone of the paper. Get a little more black. Make a darker gray. Probably a little bit more than I've got. Need a more of a mid-tone here since I don't have as many leaps. I'll go a little darker. That looks good. It's a nice, good, solid mid-tone gray. We'll add a little more black in. It's pretty dark. The next one will be pretty much almost black, just a little bit of a gray to it. And a little more white into that. There we are. And there we have our black to white values. So at this point in time, I realized that I forgot to hit my record button both for the red-green scale and the yellow-purple scale. I was talking myself into a camera in an empty room for the past about 15 minutes and did not realize it. So, that being said, the red, green, and yellow-purple scales I will have up on a separate video. I will redo them and they will be up on the channel hopefully sometime in the near future. Finally, we've got our orange and blue scale now to do, now that I've forgotten to do the other ones. And for that, we still have our orange color that we can mix more up of, and for our blue, I'm going to need a little more of my cerulean blue. So I have about what I've decided to use for my orange over here. I'll throw that in. And we'll grab our cerulean blue for the other side. In between these two, we'll have a nice sort of brown color in the middle, because that's what all of these do, between the yellow with the purple with the red and the green, or the orange and the blue. When you mix a primary and a secondary together that are opposite colors, you will get a nice sort of toned brown in the middle. For that reason, I actually don't use any kind of brown on my regular color palette. I have yellow ochre, which is a little bit of a yellowish brown color, but I do not grab an umber or sienna, or just something called brown, because I feel like it's too much of a cheat and you can really mix more intricate and complex browns between your opposite colors. In this instance, orange is our light color compared to the blue, so we're going to start with our orange and slowly mix some blue into it. And between orange and blue, I find that when you're mixing orange into blue, the leaps are actually going to be bigger, because I find that blue is actually a slightly more potent color than orange. I'm not really sure why. The other colors do have a little bit of that color shift right away, but I think between the blue and orange that color shift is actually increased a little bit more. That's just has to do with the colors, I suppose. Never really understood why the leap was so much larger. There's that nice brown color that we've been seeing sort of all the way up. Get a little bit more water on my brush. Make sure that paint stays wet, flows. Now when we get a lot of this blue into the orange, we actually start to get a little bit of a green color. And these earthy tones, especially in the middle, are really great for landscape artists, but they also can be really useful as well for portrait painters as well. So if you're looking for those real complex colors in between, just stick to your primaries and your secondaries, and don't worry about all these other colors, especially a lot of the times the ones that I use. My personal painting style focuses on a little bit less color mixing and a little bit more of the pure color. For this reason, you're going to see a little bit of that difference in my work versus in other people's work when you see that people mix their colors a little bit more than I do. And there we have our orange to blue scale. For this final part, I'm going to be taking a green and a yellow and mixing them both into a black for a scale and white for a scale. For this reason, you're going to be able to see what black and white do to individual colors of paint, and between a light color and a dark color, what the biggest color shifts are for that individual color. So I'm going to start with the green, and on one side we'll have green, on the other side we'll have black, and the other side of our second one we'll have white. And because there's already white on my brush, I'm actually going to do the lower one first. So we'll get that white color and slowly mix in green. For this example, white is my light and green will be my dark. I'll start out with a bit of a mint. And as we work darker, we'll turn more into like a seafoam green. Darker still, you get a green that's probably more of an abstract painting color. Fabric even. Get colors that really only exist in, say, like polyester fabric. Color dyes, clothing dyes. Final green will be almost exactly pure. Just kind of whatever white was on the brush. Actually, all these three are pretty similar. Next up, we'll go to our blacks. Between the green and the black, the green is actually now our light color. So we'll start with the green and slowly add black to it. This one's going to be significantly difficult because the green is already very dark. We need a little bit more green on the palette. Let's get black up here. Play with just what that does. I actually find that this section between here and here probably is going to be too much. I imagine I'm going to get down into the darks a lot faster. Yeah, these two are about the same. I'll just make the scale a little bit shorter. Because really you're just getting a very quick dark. The green already being dark, and then going into the black, the color shift is much shorter. Before we hit that pure black. Now I'm going to need a little bit more yellow on my palette, but in order to make things a little bit easier on myself, I'm just going to take a knife and drop my yellow in real quick on the page like that. So we're going to start with our white, and compared to the white, yellow becomes the dark color, which seems weird because they're both very light. But for a mixing standpoint, yellow has a darker pigment to it. We'll slowly add our yellow to it. In the mix of yellow and white that I'm making now, I actually use in my skies quite often. I'll use it to make my suns, actually. Because I don't want my sun to be pure yellow, and I also don't want it to be super bright white. I like to get this nice, a little bit slightly shaded, or slightly tinted rather, yellow. Make that little bit of an off-white. Mixing yellow to white again, yellow actually is very potent when compared to white. And so it's hard to get a nice subtle mix. Actually a little more yellow here. These two are just about the same. That's a little better. And then this one will be just about pure. So I can use any remaining white on my brush. Just mix it down in. Right about like that. Next up we're going to mix our yellow into black, which originally I was going to have blue into black, but I think yellow into black actually has a really interesting and more complex color shift, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment here. The interesting thing about yellow into black is depending on the yellow, and of course depending on the black, you're actually going to get a color in the center that resembles a little bit of a deep green. So, in this case, as before with the green, the yellow is our lighter color, and the contrast between the two is much more pronounced, as opposed to the green. The contrast is a little bit less pronounced. If you were to take this image into Photoshop, and I might do this right now with the video, and now in black and white you can see that the contrast between the green and the black is really less than the yellow and the black. So starting with that yellow, I'm going to add a tiny little bit of black. And we get that first shade down, which already kind of resembles a bit of an earthy green color. Get a little more paint on there. It's a little thin. Adding a little more black. Get a nice darker color. Actually, it's the same one again. There's a little bit of a trick to paint mixing. It's not always super easy. Now this color is going to resemble our yellow-green from our color wheel ever so slightly. Black. A lot of artists are going to tell you that you shouldn't even have black in your colors of paint, and well, in a lot of ways they are right. Personally, I have found that over the years that having just black on hand can really be a lifesaver for certain projects. And really on most black, it's just a little bit of a yellow to it. It is right here. And there we have our complete set of values and color relationships. Again, for the green and purple scale, which unfortunately I did not get recorded, those scales will be in a separate video. You can click on an annotation here. Eventually it will become available, but in the early stages when this video first comes out, that'll just be basically an empty box. So you can also check the links in the description box below for time codes and all that kind of stuff to skip around this video, find something you may have missed, and of course there will be a link eventually to the supplementary video for those colors. So whether this is your first time painting, or if you've done it 1,000 times before, doing an exercise like this can be a really great way to boost your learning and boost your skill and understanding of color and color relationships. So I hope you found this video and exercise useful in your own work, and for more art videos like this one, subscribe to the channel. This has been from DMC Films and Cinder Studios. See you guys next time.